All right, we're kicking things off with Vicki McKenna for CultureCast. Vicki, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely.
You know, it is an absolute shame that as we, as a nation, as a world, are really climbing out from under this cloud of COVID. It is stunning to me how so-called scientists and doctors are willing to hold us back, let people die, poison children in schools with these masks, all for nothing more than unscientific vanity. The story you have today is pretty horrible. Clue us in.
All right, I'll give you the details of this story, and I will just say that I believe fits under the category of bioethical utilitarianism gone off the rails. And it is a story from Wisconsin, Seymour, Wisconsin, the story of a young girl named Grace Shera. She was 19 years old. She was diagnosed with COVID in October. Her family brought her to a hospital in Appleton, Wisconsin, and a handful of days later, she was dead. Now, she wasn't dead from COVID. She didn't die from COVID. She wasn't on a ventilator. It wasn't one of those stories where she was denied access to ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or something like that. She was actually killed with a sedative cocktail. A sedative cocktail, 3 different sedatives, the last one being morphine, which was pushed directly and immediately into her system, which caused her death. Her family, and I had a chance to speak with her father, Scott, her family indicates that the physicians and the staff who were treating Grace established a do not resuscitate order on her, a DNR for short. So the DNR was not the wishes of Grace. It was not the wishes of the family. It was not the wishes of her medical power of attorney, her legal guardians. She was DNR because a doctor decided to declare her DNR, which, by the way, is flagrantly illegal. It is illegal in every state, I think, in America. Certainly it's illegal in Wisconsin. And so when she was getting very close to death and they were asking for assistance, they were asking for the antidote to morphine, they were asking for someone to go in there and help her, they refused because there was a do not resuscitate order on her. It is an absolutely horrifying and harrowing story. There's been no answers as well to the family. Incidentally, additionally, the family was kept from seeing her. There was an armed guard posted at her bedroom door, at her hospital room door. Family members were not permitted in. When Grace tried to get up and use the bathroom, she was ordered to stay in her bed, and when she insisted on using the bathroom, now remember, she's Down syndrome, so when she insists on using the bathroom, the response is to restrain her wrists and her ankles in bed. So she couldn't use the bathroom. She was as I understand from her dad, very upset, confused, and ultimately, this is how she was when doctors administered a sedative cocktail that took her life. Her family is seeking all alternatives right now. They're looking at legal interventions. They are avoiding making claims about the motivations of this hospital and this particular doctor. The dad did indicate to me that he's read all of the charts, all of the different reports, and he said that there's multiple references to her Down syndrome. There's multiple references to the shape of her face. As you all know, Down syndrome produces a certain shape to the face. So the references, almost derisive references to this. She was also multiple times it indicated in her chart and in her paperwork that she wasn't vaccinated. So the question in the mind of the parents, after they insisted that there was no DNR, they didn't authorize a DNR. Grace didn't authorize a DNR, but the DNR was put there. They wonder, perhaps because she was Down syndrome, perhaps because she was unvaccinated, maybe a combination of both. And they also indicate she was on Medicaid, and Medicaid pays substantially lower to occupy a hospital bed. And there were, at the time, multiple people awaiting administering, or rather the administration admitting them to hospital beds. And so they also wonder whether or not there was more money that was waiting to occupy that bed than their daughter's coverage was going to bring the hospital. He's very confused. He's very upset. This happened in October of 2021. From October 6th to October 13th. She was admitted October 6th. She died on October 13th, and they just want some answers.
Now, you mentioned when talking to the father mentioned to you that a few of the nurses actually suggested to the parents after the fact that Grace, quote, Grace did not have to die this day. That even some of the nurses privately were apparently surprised by the treatment and said to the parents as a way of comforting, trying to comfort them or alert them that this should not have happened, basically.
Yeah, that's what he told me in my interview with him yesterday, was that nurses privately came up to them and indicated that they thought the family was in fact correct in their assessment of the situation, that it wasn't a futile case. Again, she wasn't on a ventilator. She wasn't, being given remdesivir. She was being given a 3-drug sedative cocktail, the last drug of which was administered directly. And if you actually look at the side effects of these drugs, and I'm going to forget one of them, I think it's called Praxidine. I may have messed up the name of that drug, lorazepam and morphine. And in the side effect of every one of those drugs on its own is death. That is a significant risk of any one of those drugs. Together, and this is in the medical literature as well, her dad did, and Grace's dad did some research on this. Obviously, together, there is a substantially increased risk of death. And so if you were actually trying to save someone, you certainly wouldn't be administering a 3-sedative cocktail, an immediate push of morphine, at least not according to anything that the father could research, would indicate that, nor is this, this is not a treatment for COVID. It doesn't make any sense because it wasn't, it didn't seem to ever be about the disease she was hospitalized for. And so the speculation is, was she considered futile because she had Down syndrome? Was she considered futile because she had Down syndrome and she was unvaccinated? Was she considered futile because she had Down syndrome, was unvaccinated, and also was on Medicaid? And that is research that the family is hoping to be able to do, and they are, looking for anybody to give this story attention. It received virtually no attention in Wisconsin media, and they're also, of course, looking at legal options.
Well, of course, you may remember, Lex, this time last year we were talking about a situation in England, the United Kingdom. The doctor also mentioned to this family that this protocol they were using was an British protocol. Protocol. And just about a year ago, we found out that the United Kingdom actually issued a DNR for Down syndrome victims of COVID, right? That they suggested that it was not necessary to resuscitate Down syndrome people specifically by name. After the break.
It's despicable. And she was 19 years old. She was a very, very high-performing, loving, happy, and productive member of society, and she was only 19 years old. And her life, her dad believes, was taken from her on purpose.
After the break, let's you and I talk about her and the consequences broader for this kind of utilitarian euthanasia. All right, we're back again with Vicki McKenna. Vicki, this is a shocking story about an otherwise incredibly high-functional, loving, very sweet young girl who happened to have Down syndrome. There she is, Grace Schirra, who was literally left to die, apparently, who went into the hospital for COVID back on October 7th. Rather getting treated for the disease, after a week, they decided, the doctor, to put her on a toxic cocktail that was designed to stop her from breathing, and she died. So first of all, you've covered this story in great detail. So if people want to find more information, where can they go to find it on your site?
There are 2 websites I would recommend if you'd like to hear my interview with Grace's father, Scott Schirra. You can go to my website. My blog post on my website at wiba.com, and then you just / my name, Vicki, V-I-C-K-I, so wiba.com/Vicki. And then also Scott has set up a site as well called ouramazinggrace.net, ouramazinggrace.net, and you can see information about her. Again, a very vivacious, very, very happy and healthy 19-year-old girl. This is, to me, and again, maybe there's an innocent explanation for this. I don't know how to think of one. A 3-drug sedative cocktail that doesn't treat COVID, which was what she was hospitalized for, against her parents' wishes. A DNR was established, do not resuscitate order established on her by a doctor, not by her family. The family fights and ends up being prohibited from being able to enter her room with an armed guard posted out of her room, and the girl being restrained. Sure, I guess maybe there's a 1 in a million chance there's an innocent explanation for this, but I don't know what it is. So this sounds to me like something that has fallen under an umbrella, what I call, utilitarian bioethics, where it's sort of the Peter Singer view of how to look at human value. It's not about intrinsic human value. It's not about human beings imbued with something natural and special that is expected to be protected by society, because that's the way God would have us view human beings. It's what is the use value? What is the the amount of use to a society that a person produces? And modern bioethicists, including bioethicists at Harvard and Princeton, and people who actually govern the bioethics boards on many hospital systems, believe in this idea of utilitarian bioethics, where if someone is not a high functioning, productive member of society, then their life is not considered as valuable as somebody else's life. It's a sliding scale of human value, and it's based on what you can do for someone else. It's unfortunately, it's insidious. It is something that is across the United States and the Western realm of bioethics. So if you're an old person on who's got pneumonia from COVID, you'll be put on a ventilator because the hospital can get money for that, but you're not going to be fed. And this has happened in multiple hospitals in the United States. You'll be withheld other types of care because there's no value to the hospital providing you that supportive care. And since the hospital is getting money for the ventilator, that's what they'll give you. Again, multiple stories like that. You have got something called feudal care theory in a lot of hospitals in the United States, where even if someone wants treatment, so you have an infection, you have sepsis or something like that, you want treatment, but maybe you're disabled, or maybe a hospital has decided that you have taken up too much space for too long. The feudal care ethic that is practiced by many bioethics boards and hospital systems will deny you your wanted care, never mind your guardian. By the way, my friend Wesley Smith has written many, many terrific pieces on this and terrific books on this. So if you want to find out more about utilitarian bioethics, he's a great resource.
I was just thinking about Wesley. You know him very well. Have you let him share this story with him?
I did. The first thing, it's such a powerful story. It's such an emotionally heartbreaking story that your emotion can get away from you, and you can just be, moved by the pain of this family, and particularly this father who very clearly loved his daughter. And so I sent it to Wesley because he's a very rational person. He's he'll be able to see, because he wasn't emotionally involved in the story. And so I sent it to him kind of as a check on myself, and he was as horrified as the rest of us. And offered some advice to this family on how to proceed with ADA complaints and legal complaints. But I'll tell you what, Duke, what it makes me say again, after now this being, over a dozen stories that I've seen about people being abandoned by the hospital system, it makes me think if I get COVID, if I get very, very sick, the last place I want to be is going to be in a hospital. Because if a doctor decides that my wishes and my views and my rights are less important than the utility of me not being somebody who's going to produce profit value for a hospital, I'd rather suffer alone at home and die surrounded by family and friends.
I think that is a very rational, very logical way to proceed. If you are going to die from COVID, die at home. The hospitals are the last place on earth you want to be, because they are not interested in curing COVID. They are interested in the statistics of COVID. They're interested in the payback of what kind of money you get from dying from COVID. You said it. And the progressive left, Vicki, I'm going to end the segment with this. The progressive left, who's behind all of this, is fond of telling us that they exclusively know how evil the Nazis were, how they exclusively are the force against Nazis. And yet what we've talked about for the last 12, 15 minutes is exactly the kind of eugenics that was engaged in places like Berlin in the 1930s. And so it shows you again that the very same people who are screaming Nazi behind every door are the ones who have their boots on doing the goose step.
And if I can say just one thing, some people would ask, well, what can we do about this? One thing I think you can do is pick up the phone and call the hospital that you might be taken to if you have to make a 911 call, and ask what their policy is. Ask what their protocols are. Get it in writing. And then make sure it's published somewhere. There's all kinds of ways to self-publish this information because it's not going to be something immediately available on hospital websites. But call your doctor, call the hospital administrators, and do not give up until you get an answer. What is your protocol if I have COVID? What is your protocol if my disabled child comes in and needs treatment and is on Medicaid? Are you going to kick us out because we're not going to create enough revenue for you? Are you going to not provide care for my loved one because my loved one doesn't have enough use value for you? That's something I think is something everybody can do, and it's pretty easy.
And that's number one. Number 1A, the minute you hang up with the hospital, call your lawyer. Don't wait until your loved one is dead to get a lawyer involved.
Agreed.
Spend the money, get a lawyer. Watching what they're doing in real time. There's nothing else you can do. Vicki, thank you very much for the disturbing story.